like there's less people than yesterday, but everybody was more spread out yesterday, so maybe it's just the way it looks.
One fortunate day that had yesterday.
Oh,
He doesn't want to teach in class.
Hey, I'll swap out if he wants to.
We don't want to.
Alrighty, guys. Just to let you know, just because this is recorded, I do have something from FireTech that I got to read off. All it's saying, well, you'll hear it in a quick second. So right off the bat, my name is Corey Forrest. I am the breathing air manager for FireTech and Safety. I'm out of the Tingsboro office. That being said, I live out in Ware, New Hampshire, so it's really not that difficult for me to scoot out here if you guys need anything. As we get further into this, you'll understand why I say that. You guys will talk about the warranty and just standard repairs and stuff like that. As of yesterday, I was told to kind of not deep dive on some of the stuff that I typically deep dive on because you guys have 8 to 10 people doing a Tech Level 1 course. So they want to reserve that information for the Tech Level 1 guys to make sure that's the whole reason why they're doing the course. So I'm going to read this off real quick and then we'll get started. So the information I'm about to provide you is the manufacturer's operating recommendations for care and maintenance of your new SCBA. 3M, Scott, and FireTech and Safety provides this in-service training as a courtesy to our customers, but should not replace your certified department SCBA training. Please review all department procedures with your administrator prior to using the products. Okay? So, I say that especially when we do a video because I'm not here to convey that to them in person, so we just want to make sure that you guys know that what I'm about to tell you is from the manufacturer and from FireTech and Safety, but at the end of the day, you guys have to go to your administrator and do your SCBA training. Okay? If at any point during this you have a question, please shoot a hand up, call it out. If I don't answer your question, it's probably the next thing I'm going to talk about. It's what I find happens a lot. People ask a question that's a great question. I just end up circling back to it in a minute or two. So if I kind of dodge the question, you'll know why. Other than that, please ask your questions. If you don't ask your questions, then I get 7 of the same question at the end. Everybody typically has the same question, so just call it out. All right? Alrighty. I like to run my in-services super informal, so let's get to it. This here is the X3 Pro. This is going to be your new SCBA that you guys are going to be operating. What you guys were operating was a 2007 AP75. So there are 2 NFPA compliancy changes between then and now. So they say an NFPA compliancy comes out every 5 years. The 2018 was pushed into 2019. We'll cover why. But they come out every 5 years. So you got 10 years of innovation between what you were using and now. So a lot of the problems you guys had, especially with the electrical wires being up here at the top, have been rectified, and we don't find to be an issue on these new SCBA. That being said, these SCBA, just like there was a 2007 and a 2013 edition of the AP75 that you guys are running, there's a 2013 edition of this X3, and it is all blue strapped with like a yellow Kevlar weave. That pack is the X3, it's 2013 edition. This is going to be your X3 Pro. As you can notice, there's red everywhere. There's red everywhere on this SCBA. The reason why they do red, I always joke around and say it's pandering to the fire department because it's red. They could have made it purple. They could have made it any color. They made it red for a reason. But one of the big reasons is to differentiate the X3 from the X3 Pro. So the difference is A, it's a 2018 edition, and B, being this red strap indicates that you can disassemble this entire harness and remove all the soft goods to launder them the same way you launder your current turnout gear, without the use of any tools. Realistically, it takes about 3 minutes to disassemble, then you launder them, put them back on, take about 3 minutes to put them back on. This is one of the things where typically I offer to go through and completely disassemble and reassemble the soft harness. As of yesterday, you guys have got, the department as a whole has about 8 to 10 guys going to a Tech Level 1 course where they're going to learn to do all that. It's going to be a department SOP as to how you guys go about laundering these straps. So, these harnesses here are made of the same exact material that your current turnout equipment is made out of. So the exterior sheathing is called Armor AP. It's used by about 1/3 of the gear manufacturers out there. Predominantly, it's used by Lion. And then the inside foam material is a high-density, low-cellular foam. So the high density means it's not going to absorb a lot of moisture. So unlike your current SCBA straps, when you squeeze them a day or two later after laundering them, you're not going to get that dirty water running out for days. And then low cellular just means there's not a lot of air pockets inside that foam to trap and contain those carcinogens. So what used to take 2-3 days to dry, now takes 2-3 hours to dry. So cleaning these and getting them back into service quickly, and as part of that clean cab movement, that's what these straps are all about. And that's one of the main differences with these red straps from the X3. You'll notice that all of them are connected via a series of snaps. There is a method to take it apart, a method to put it back together. Like I said, for those of you going to the course, you guys will learn how to do that. And then depending on what happens after that, you guys may or may not end up doing it as a department. So, but again, that's up to the department and the SOPs. You notice here at the top, there's a wider V at the connection, so that way guys like me, you're not going to get those rub marks on the back of your neck. It's not going to dig in. It also sits lower on your back, so that way, for most people, you can still access the DRD within your gear. Now, that's not always viable, depending on how tall, how long your whole torso is, stuff like that. But we find with most individuals, you can still access that DRD. In the case that you cannot, up under here it says DRL, you have a 1000 horizontal drag rated strap. As you saw, it's connected via 2 snaps and snapped up underneath, so it's not a snag hazard. With that being said, you can leave it open or you can snap it down. Doesn't matter either way. It's obviously kept snapped down specifically to avoid being a snag hazard. From there, down to the waistband. Well, that out of the way. Your single point of connection here at the waistband is a non-mechanical lock. So it's a piece of Kevlar woven through the back frame here. If any of you are familiar with Molly or Alice type equipment, it's woven and connected via the same way. So what that does, that single point of connection allows for about 37 degrees of articulation in either direction. And because it's not connected on either side, it'll fit the smallest of guys or the largest of guys without having a triangular effect on those smaller guys. On some of those older packs of smaller guys with those wings, because it held it fastened to the SCBA harness, you'd find that they wouldn't really wrap and hold the smaller guys as well. This pack is designed in conjunction with the backpack company Osprey, if I remember correctly, to be the best load-bearing harness with comfort for this SCBA. It is designed to be worn with waistband fastened down completely, and then leaving about a gloved hand up underneath the shoulder pads, so roughly 2 inches. What that's going to do is that's going to reduce that shoulder fatigue. When you reduce fatigue, you reduce how much air you're consuming, and when you reduce how much air you're consuming, that means you can be on air for longer, right?
But the state, since they changed the standard.
Well, so we're going to get into that with the pneumatics. So, yeah, NFPA in 2013 did some funky stuff. Any questions about this harness or the materials, fit, finish, stuff like that? So the big thing is comfort and cleanability. When these straps and harnesses get pulled off, the whole design behind them is that you throw them in the same gear extractors and on the same gear dryers or in the gear dryers, depending on which gear dryer you have. So that way you can launder these with the same frequency and with the same ease as your turnout gear. Now what you guys do as a department is completely up to you. We will get to cleaning and sanitizing at the very end. It's the last thing I talk about. But you're going to launder them exactly the same way that you do your turnout gear. And like I said, most likely with the same frequency, because if your turnout gear is that dirty, chances are the SCBA are too. So, if there's no questions about that, I'm going to move on to the cylinder. The cylinder is a super quick one. This is your 30-minute carbon fiber wrapped DOT approved cylinder. Has your CGA connection here at the bottom. It connects the same way that your old SCBA did. You have to crank that thing on. One thing that I always saw that was a problem, though, may or may not be in this department, when you attach this cylinder retention strap. See how easy it is for me to activate and deactivate that strap? If you guys have this tightened down any more than that, you guys have to put your weight on. You guys hear this whole pack groaning as you try to ratchet that strap down. It's way too tight. You're putting unnecessary stresses on the back frame and the plastics and synthetic materials that don't need to be there. All that is to retain this cylinder from going like this at the top. So once you connect that, it doesn't flop around, right? It's going to connect the same way. You have your thumb latch at the bottom here. It's going to disconnect, and you got your cylinder. This cylinder is the exact same cylinder that you guys have been running for a long time. The valve is exactly the same. There is a feature on this valve that I did not realize that some departments don't know about, is everybody seems to like how, well, I shouldn't say everybody, some people seem to like how MSAs you can free spin without having to push in to crank open and close, right? That's just a spring and a nut. Now, I don't recommend going around your department cranking them all down, but if as a department you decide that you prefer the free spin as opposed to that cam lock, you can tighten that spring up so that way you don't have to depress that to spin it. Again, that's a department thing. I highly recommend calling us at FireTech. The guys will come out, they'll tighten it down. Realistically, though, as long as you don't wrench that thing down and you leave just a little bit of motion, you'll be good to go, right? So that's a department preference, completely up to you guys, but it is a feature that I didn't realize that people didn't know, is that you could actually tighten that nut up to prevent that. One thing different about this cylinder that you may notice, A, we have your wrap on it. This is sequentially numbered 1 through 116. Upon delivery, my guys went through the cylinders and didn't note that there were any missing numbers. So Luxfer, the cylinder manufacturer, does destructive testing at random. So as these are getting manufactured, they could have easily pulled one, done destructive testing, and they say that when they do the destructive testing, they're not marking what number was destructively tested, so they either add a number at the end or there's a cylinder without a number on it. So if you guys come across a cylinder that looks a little bit different, doesn't have that labeling on it, or it's a not 1 through 116, that's why. But none of my techs noted that there was a number missing. That being said, I had 3 techs going through it, so to be quite honest, there may be one in there, but I doubt it at this point. Okay. The other thing is, you'll notice at the top here, what used to be a hollow cavity now has an RFID logo. It's a raised cylinder. It doesn't protrude from on top of the bumper, but there is an RFID tag in there. What that RFID tag is for the newer style compressors, like the Unicus 4i, stuff like that from Bauer. Rather than having to do a manual log when you do the fill station, there are new compressors and fill stations that'll actually electronically log with the RFID tags when it's filled, so you never have to do a manual log. So that's what the RFID tags are for on these cylinders. In the future, I don't see that ever going away. It just makes life easier for you guys. So down the line, that may end up being a thing. But the tech is here in Scott cylinders already, and it is already in use on some of the newer compressors. Any questions about your aluminum wrapped 15-year cylinder? Hydrotest statically tested once every 5 years per DOT standards, 15-year life. So, the next 2 things I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to do a little out of order from yesterday. I'm going to start with the electronics first, this time around. So, this is the largest change when it comes to the 2018 standard SCBA. Across manufacturers, NFPA now dictates that you have to monitor and record pretty much everything short of sight and sound. So this pack doesn't turn off. Well, you're telling me there's no lights, there's no sounds, this pack's off, right? It's still recording what level the batteries are at, how much air is in it. But that's going to be 0 and then whatever the battery percentage is. So it's not taking a lot for that to keep that recording, right? But it is still on. It's just waiting, just like the phones on the tables. They're all on, but they're not doing anything. They're just waiting for that signal. Same thing with this SCBA. The signal that it's waiting for is air. So once you hit this with air, all the lights come on, then the pack is recording when the pass alarm goes off, what pressure the tank's at, how fast the air is flowing, when the last time the pass alarm went off, when you change the cylinder, when you change batteries, so on and so forth. It's easier just to say that this thing records just about everything to do with the SCBA short cycle sound. Well, now, Corey, if you take the batteries out, how does it know when you did a battery change? Because it's going to watch the batteries go from 35 or 20% all the way back up to 100%, right? It's not going to say this was a battery change, but in the case of a fatality, if NIOSH comes in, all that data recording, what they're going to do is they're going to pull it out. Think of it as a little black box on an airplane. They're going to strip all the information out of this. They're going to look at it and say, hey, you went in with full cylinder, 78% battery, came out, put a new cylinder on, but that cylinder only had half of the cylinder. It was only half full. Why'd you go in? Or, hey, we retrieved a fatality, mask was knocked off the face, it was free-flowing air. You can see that it was either breathed down or free-flowed or was taken off at the end. So all it is about finding out why fatalities are happening. And that's the biggest thing for the data recording. No one's driving by with Bluetooth sensors picking that up. You guys can't access it with Bluetooth sensors to record or strip that information out of there. It's just there. It records every 72 hours of full operating time. So it's got about 72 hours worth of full operating time worth of memory. Once it hits that 72 hours, it starts overwriting from the beginning. Now, can anybody tell me how often or for how long at a time you guys wear an SCBA? Hour, 2 hours, stuff like that, depending on how that overhaul is. So to hit that 72 hours worth of recording, even as this just sits, because it's full operating time. As it's just sitting in the truck, it's not recording it is recording every minute, but the amount of data that takes is much smaller. So it's going to take you guys a long time to hit 72 operating hours before it starts overriding again. And that's more than enough time for NFPA or NIOSH to come in, do their investigation, take the information off of it. They have Bluetooth sensors that can take modules that can take it off. I have Bluetooth modules that can take it off. But realistically, the only time that ever happens is when NIOSH comes in to do an investigation. Any questions about the data that this records? All right.
One or two will be coming back.
Okay. So, any questions about the data recording? So all it is, it's there. It's mandatory for NFPA and NIOSH. There's nothing we can do about it. There's nothing. It's just there. Well, if it's constantly on, what does that mean about the batteries? They're constantly in use. Just like the phone battery, my phone's going to last for 3 days without a charge if I don't do anything with it, right? But the second I start using it to text and watch videos and go on social media sites, it drains much faster. So even when it's not doing anything, this is still taking a charge. And this is where battery changes are critical. So there is, and from what the factory has told us, 330 plus full operating hours of life on 6 AA batteries. And now that's assuming that the batteries are new manufactured, have been stored in a good environment, and are fairly fresh, right? Once you store them for 1, 2, 3 years, and you store them in a hot or cold environment, obviously the batteries are going to fluctuate in the amount of charge that they have. But at full fresh batteries, you have 330 plus operating hours on this SCBA. That's not 330 hours of batteries being inside the SCBA. So what they say is you should be changing your batteries once every 4 to 6 months. There's a box of user manuals downstairs. I expect you all to read them. There's going to be a test. I'm kidding. These are about the driest pieces of documentation Scott has ever put out. But on page 44 is probably one of the most important pages of this. And specifically for the techs. There are 6 approved batteries, 4 of which are Duracells. I do not and cannot, in good faith, recommend a Duracell battery after the abysmal quality control that we found coming out of the Duracell batteries. They used to be a staple of, that's what the batteries should be. They were the gold standard. I don't know what happened to them. We have found nothing but horrible battery control problems. I think in talking to Lieutenant Amato that you guys have experienced the same kind of thing with the Duracells. So that takes the 4 top ones right out of there. Then
What kind of
the bottom 2 are energizers. So there's the Energizer EN91 and then the Energizer E91. I've never personally used the E91s, but what I can tell you is that Scott ships with Energizer Industrial EN91 batteries. Here at FireTech, we've swapped everything over from the Duracell Pro Cells to the EN91s. Cambridge uses them, Lexington now uses them. Cambridge and Lexington, I had huge problems with Duracells in the past. We used to get called just about every 2 days from them. Now we don't hear from them at all. Well, not for battery problems at least. So, changing your batteries is absolutely critical. Scott says once every 6 months. Here at FireTech, we say once every 4 to 6 months, depending on frequency of use. Obviously, if you're a busy department, you're going to be using batteries faster. Not only that, but you're going to find that the batteries in the officer's seats are going to get used the most, right? The packs are always getting turned on the most. So, we say once every 4 to 6 months. It sounds from yesterday that you guys are going to have a battery changing policy of once every 3 months. You can do it quarterly, it sounds like. So, just if they ask you to throw Duracells in there, there is a list of approved batteries, but I can't in good faith recommend them. I get nothing from Duracell. We can sell you the batteries, but obviously my guys have to go get them. It's an upcharge. I'll tell you, like I told everybody else, we always bought our batteries from Batteries and Bulbs on Amber Street in Nashville. We just found an extremely cost-effective place online that we're buying them from that we provided Kelly, or that I think my lead tech is sending the information over to Kelly this afternoon. So, any questions about the batteries that you're supposed to use? Those batteries are going to be 6AA's located here on the side. It is a steel P3 screw going into a steel post. That P3 screwdriver that is required to remove that appropriately can also take a quarter, a nickel, the edge of a wallet, if you have a metal wallet like I do, back of a knife. Just about anything can open this. And then thermal molded right on the outside of the synthetic cap says torque to 12 to 15 inch-pounds. Yes, please use a torque screwdriver if you have it. If you do not have a torque screwdriver handy, the best estimate that we at FireTech have found, 3 fingers on an 8-inch long screwdriver. Once your fingers start to slip, that's right around 12 to 15 inch-pounds. Now, is that going to be different from person to person? Of course, it's not a industry staple to measure your 8-inch screwdriver, put 3 fingers on it. Use a torque screwdriver if you guys have access to one. If you don't have access to one, they're only about $20. I highly recommend you guys pick one up. Anything more than 15 inch-pounds has the ability to potentially start spider fracturing that synthetic cup. All it is a synthetic cup with a Goga gasket O-ring around it. It's the same ones that you guys have had on your past SCBA. On your 2007s, it was a little bit different shape. Same premise though, steel post, steel screw, plastic cup. Have any of you guys taken a red Solo cup, flipped upside down, and slapped the bottom of it? Watch it fracture out on all the sides. Same thing is going to happen with this cup. Now, it's not going to be as dramatic or as entertaining, but if you put too much of a torque on that plastic cover, you're going to crush the plastic between the 2 pieces of metal. If you do that, that defeats the O-ring, allows moisture in the system, corrodes your batteries. Because you're changing your batteries quarterly, that's really the only way your batteries are going to corrode, is if moisture gets in. So, torque it to the right spec. It's thermomolded right on the outside. It's impossible to forget because it's right there in your face every time you change your batteries. If your batteries are corroded, please retain those batteries. Have one of our techs come out and make sure that we're logging the corrosion appropriately, so that way, because you guys are going to be using the appropriate battery, you guys are also going to be changing them quarterly, and you guys are going to be torquing to the right spec. So the 3M Scott rep has gone so far as to say that as long as you keep those records and you do what you're supposed to be doing via the owner's manual, that they will do their best to work with you as much as possible on on those battery problems. Because if you guys are doing what you're supposed to, it's then no longer a department issue, it is a stock issue, or it is a Energizer issue. And local 3M rep Dan Burke has said that he will work with you guys on to the best of his ability. And if for some reason Scott can't do it, FireTech and Safety has put a clause in our contract with you guys purchasing the SCBA that we will help work with you on that as well. So, you guys do your battery changes, you guys shouldn't have any electrical problems ever that aren't covered under warranty. Alright? But warranty. Your warranty on your old packs used to be 15 years on the reducer, 10 years on your, 5 years on your electronics, and 3 years on your soft goods. The X3 Pro now has a bumper-to-bumper lifetime of ownership warranty against manufacturing defects and defaults. So what does that mean? That means there's two things that they don't cover under warranty. Battery corrosion, because it's considered preventative maintenance, but if you're changing everything and doing everything per the manual, that's why FireTech and 3M Scott has gone so far as to say that to you guys, that as long as you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, then it's going to be an Energizer or a hardware malfunction. So, the other thing is gross misuse. So what do they classify as gross misuse? Nobody in the history of the fire service has ever slammed this in a door before. Or this in a door before. Or that. Because that's never happened in the history of the fire service, that wouldn't be considered gross misuse, right? It's gross misuse. So, that's what they're talking about, gross misuse. Don't use these things as wheel chocks. But if you do, wipe the goddamn tire marks off, please. They will not accept warranty with tire marks on it, if you get what I'm talking about. So, here at FireTech, we spent about $1 million in parts to keep our parts room stocked all the time. As a tenant of the model, can probably attest to you guys, when you guys have to do a warranty repair, you have to take the part off, send it to Scott, they send you back a part. That's how most IRCs have functioned for years. Here at FireTech, we take a part off, we put one of our parts on, and we wait the 2-3 weeks for the new part to come in, or we take a credit from Scott for the part and buy another part. You know, what that allows is for us to turn around your equipment in 24 to 48 hours rather than 2 to 4 weeks. So, FireTech and Safety has invested a lot in parts. If something's out of service, bumper to bumper, lifetime of ownership warranty. We talked about 20 years being the lifetime of an SCBA compliance, correct? Is that lifetime of ownership? No, you're gonna, if you guys retain these packs for years prior, years afterwards, realistically, lifetime of ownership means as long as you guys own these packs, whether or not they're NFPA compliant is different. Okay? If something is broken, if you slam something in the door, if something goes wrong with the pack, tag it out of service. Either myself, local sales rep, or one of my service techs will come out, we'll pick up your equipment, fix it, send as much out to warranty as we possibly can, get it back to you guys. Now, if you guys call me in 6 years and say, hey, my straps are falling apart, stuff like that, is that warranty? Yes. Now, if it's one pack that looks like it's been sitting inside of a structure fire for 4 hours, is that warranty? No, that's Christmas use, right? If you call me 16 years from now and say, hey, Corey, every strap on my across my apparatus is falling apart, is that warranty? Yeah. If one pack in 16 years, the straps are starting to fray and fall apart on it, but the rest are fine, is that warranty? It's a kind of a case-by-case basis when you start hitting that high mileage on these packs, you know what I mean? So if something comes up, tag it out of service. Between SCBA that you guys have and the quick turnaround time, it's better just to have us get that warranty in and get it fixed rather than have it sit or potentially be a danger to somebody else, right? Because it's life safety. Any questions about the bumper-to-bumper lifetime ownership warranty? Alrighty. So, talking about these electrical housings, since the 2007 standard forward, they've been potted. And what that means is that they've been floated in an epoxy, just like marine instruments have been for years. What that does is it completely eliminates any airspace inside of that unit. So all of this is completely solid with epoxy. So it's waterproof, shock resistant, and fire resistant. When I say shock, I mean vibrations, physical damage, not like electrical shock. So, waterproof, it's pretty obvious, right? You guys are going to be cleaning them, you guys are going to be working with water pretty much constantly. Water is one of the deaths of electronics. What's the other death? Heat, right? It's fire resistant, not because we think that you guys are going to light yourselves on fire and go walk around with an SCBA. It's for that data logging. So that way, in the worst case scenario, they can come in and still access all that information that they're having you guys, or having these SCBA mandated to be reported. From there, the fire resistance also provides you a level of heat resistance to your high heat alarm on your electronics. It was asked yesterday in the class if there was a high heat alarm. There is a high heat alarm that emits from this SCBA when the electronics board, if I remember right, hits 175 degrees internal temperature. But as you guys know, convection versus conduction, convectively, to get through all that epoxy and raise that electronic board's temperature to 175 degrees is going to take a substantial amount of time, and it is in an extremely hot environment. To the point that as soon as they started potting their electronics, I have never heard the high heat alarm again. On the 2002 editions, it was the hollow cavity. That would reach that temperature, not quickly, but enough that you'd be able to hear that SCBA sound. It is a high-pitched screeching sound that is unlike any other. It is super obvious when it goes off. If you have been exposed to prolonged high amounts of heat and the SCBA starts making a non-pass alarm sound, that's going to be your high heat alarm. I highly recommend removing the batteries after you get out of that environment, because what it has to do is that high heat alarm, that high heat has to cool back below 175 degrees for that alarm to turn on. So if it's over that, if it took convection X amount of time to get to that threshold, it's going to take the same amount of time to kind of cool down. So just be aware if it's making that screech sound, you might want to pop that battery cover, loosen it up so the connections aren't touching, so it's not powering that alarm. Realistically, though, I've never heard the alarm on the potted electronics, and I've never heard of anybody having to do that.
Our old packs are doing that with the corrosion issue.
It's the same sound. So that sound that you're hearing with the corrosion is that high heat alarm. That corrosion, because of the battery changes, because of using Energizer Industrials, and because of torquing that battery cover to the proper spec, you guys shouldn't ever hear that sound. Because you guys are going to be changing your batteries quarterly, that corrosion shouldn't be building up. But if you do, again, see corrosion, that's something that you guys used to clean. You guys can still clean. It's just better to have my guys take a look at it and make sure that we love sending the grossest corroded covered stuff to Scott and being like, hey, that's not supposed to do that. Because if you start cleaning it and everything like that, it makes it look not as bad as it was. So make sure that if you see corrosion, let somebody know. Take pictures of it. Retain those batteries. Don't just take those corroded batteries and throw them in the garbage. You know, the more information we have to fight on your behalf to Scott, the better. So your sensor module's potted, your chest console's potted, as well as your HUD visor up here. So every electrical unit that potentially could have airspace in it has that UV cure epoxy throughout. Now, you'll notice that you got your same two sound emitters. You'll notice there are red stickers on these ones. The red stickers have always indicated for Scott whether or not Pack Tracker was turned on in SCBA. You guys not purchase Pack Tracker wands. That doesn't mean that you can't purchase them in the future, and that doesn't mean that this pack does not get picked up by that signal. So, Pack Tracker is turned on in this SCBA. You guys didn't buy them, so we're not going to cover that today, but it is turned on as of the 2018 standard in every new manufactured X3 Pro. Those red stickers are on your sound emitters. We call them piezos. These are built into the SCBA. So if I remember right, the NFPA standard for decibel reading or decibel ratings on the pass alarm has to be at 82 decibels. Scott has gone so far to make this the loudest pack they've ever produced at 102 decibels. So, not only are they annoying, they're loud. Now, this is where, so decibel levels start to cause permanent hearing damage for sharp sounds such as gunshots and loud bangs and stuff hitting the floor at 80 decibels. Now, working sounds are different. Working sounds are engines running, chainsaws, motors, stuff like that, pass alarms. And what that is distance from the sound to exposure time, and it's this long math equation that you're not going to sit there and do as you walk up on a pass alarm screeching off in the bay, right? Realistically, if you're doing RIT training or if you're doing training that involves the SCBA being on, if you have to have the pass alarm going, I highly recommend just putting 2 soft earplugs covering those emitter ports and putting a piece of tape over them. Remember to take them off. But if you have to have that pass alarm going, that's what I do when I do my pack tracker training. I mute this pack down as much as possible so that way it's not screeching at me, because 102 decibels is loud. It's uncomfortable, it's ear piercing, but if you ever need it, I want all 102 decibels blaring off saying, come help me, right? So that's why they're there, that's why they're that loud. You'll notice that the cylinder goes in the center and there's one mounted on either side, so it doesn't matter if you pitch to one side or the other, there will always be a sound emitter aimed up and out of whatever you're in, right? No one's going to balance perfectly on their cylinder, on their back, in their SCBA. They're always going to fall from one side to the other, which allows that emitter to be pointed up, producing the highest amount of sound possible. On either side of those are 2 smoked out lenses. That houses 4 LEDs. You guys can guess 3 of the colors: green, amber, and red. Mirrors your HUD visor, and they're called your 360-degree air management lights. And what that is your HUD visor hasn't changed. You have 2 green, an amber, and a red. 2 green means full, 1 green means 3/4, amber means half, red now means 1/3 as of 2013. Your HUD lights will send the same signal to these lights and the lights on your chest. So now, if your HUD's green, the lights on your pack flash green slowly. If you're amber, the lights flash a little faster and amber. And if you're red, the lights flash fast and flash red. Now, if at any point your pass alarm goes off while you're breathing air, you could have a full cylinder, your pass alarm goes off, it's going to override all those lights with a flashing red light. So not only can everybody hear whose pass alarm it is, they can now see whose pass alarm it is. So, those are your 360-degree air management lights, but there also is that 4th LED that I was telling you guys about. That is a blue LED. The blue LED signifies it doing an electronic self-check of the system. So, you can click the yellow button on your console once. Lights fire off blue, and because they're brand new batteries, fires off green. You guys changing your batteries quarterly, I would be very surprised if you ever saw an amber battery. Typically, I tell people if they're going to be changing the batteries every 6 months, depending on the frequency you've used in the pack, you might see it change to amber. But I've seen packs with batteries go a very long time. That 330 plus operating hours is really a significant period of time when you start doing the math of how long you guys actually wear them at a time and with what kind of frequency. That doesn't mean don't change them quarterly or don't change them once every 4 to 6 months. That just means you should have confidence in knowing that your batteries aren't going to die every 3 or 4 months. All right? But again, this doesn't change unless the department asks you to change your SOPs on doing your truck checks for your packs in the morning. You're still going to air them up. You're going to see that blue LED fire off. It's going to go through all its pressure ranges. You're going to see all the lights on this fire up. It's doing an electronic self-check. But say you show up, say you're a call guy, so you show up and you want to check the batteries as you put it on. Hit that. I just did battery check, so it's going to be angry at me for a second. You hit that battery, or that yellow button once. It's going to fire off blue, and it's going to read out that. So Scott's got some weird percentages, so I'm not going to use the percentages. I used the percentages yesterday, but they don't make sense, so we're not going to use the Scott percentages for the battery life. Red batteries should not be used in a fire. Red batteries mean you've only got about 30 to 45 minutes left on your cylinders, or on your battery life, excuse me. And you guys are running what size cylinder? 30 minutes. So if you're running a 30-minute cylinder, you've only got about 30 to 45 minutes. The second that light turns red,
It should be able to get like 3 bottles in.
so, but that's catching it when that light goes red. If you catch that light when that goes red, you're going to have about 30 to 45 minutes worth of cylinder, or battery life. You got 30-minute cylinders. They don't recommend that you use a red indicated battery inside of an SCBA or inside of a fire condition or a hazmat condition. If it illuminates yellow or amber, that's 2 to 3 hours worth of operating time. They say that's fine to be able to use that in any kind of hazardous condition. Realistically, though, you guys aren't going to be seeing that amber and red, but if you do, that's what they mean, and that's how much time you have. Okay? So those are your 360-degree air management lights. Over to your console, you still have your red button, which shows you in the full panic mode. Then you got your yellow button on the side. 2 clicks brings it out of full panic or full pass. 2 clicks also turns off the SCBA. It's not a 6-clicker. No matter how many times you blast that button, it's only going to register 2 of those clicks. And then obviously 1 click, just like it used to, 1 press, it's going to take that and it's going to mute that pass alarm down as long as it's not in full pass. Your
Just
gauge.
look at the audible, or the dead battery, low battery.
Yep, the low battery, it's still going to chime off, so when you get that red indicated battery, you're going to hear this weird chirping coming from the pack. Typically, you walk into the apparatus bay and you'll just hear this weird chirp coming from somewhere and you got to chase it down. Same thing's happening with these packs. These packs are going to have a low battery chirp at that red indicated battery.
Will that do that with the pack on?
Yep. So as long as there are batteries in it, it'll start chiming off. So the next aspect is
How can we turn that off if we need to? Say it's really in the truck on the way back, or is it good?
so there was one time that I picked up packs from a department. I think it was like Lunenburg, and I drove from Lunenburg to Tingsboro in a box truck with about 4 SCBA that started making noise halfway back. People were giving me strange looks on the highway and at the lights because I had like what sounded like emergency vehicle sounds coming out of the pack. So there's nothing you can really do about it. The best way is unscrewing the battery cover enough so it stops making that connection, but then people forget that they undid that, and then they keep it on there, and then somebody goes to use it and wonders why the batteries aren't working. So, unfortunately, no, there's not a way to just mute it down or shut it off without changing the batteries. Your console still has your tritium illuminated gauge. It's your pneumatic sweep gauge. There's nothing about this gauge that is driven by electronics. The only point of connection between the electronics and the pneumatics in this entire pack is right here. And all that does is that's a single little connection to allow that SCBA sensor to detect how much pressure is in the pack and in the cylinder. So, pneumatic sweep gauge, as long as you have air, you're going to get air and you're going to see how much air you have. Alright? That's really it for the electronics for the most part. As you guys know, everybody jokingly calls it the Scott Shuffle. It's a side-to-side movement. In the older SCBA, there actually used to be a little ball bearing that you had to get swinging in some of those SCBA. Now it's a weighted disc with laser eyes going through it. And these holes, every time that hole breaks the laser eye, it resets the timer. But it is a horizontal movement. So if you guys are jumping up and down or going forward and back, it's not going to reset that timer. Just pretend you're hip checking somebody. Just kick your hip to one side. These packs are significantly more sensitive than the old packs used to be. So you're not going to have to sit there and dance the whole time. Even if you'll watch, I stand up here and I kind of shift my weight back and forth while I'm doing these. It's because that simple movement will keep these packs from going into pass. So as long as you're moving, these packs will go. All right? Any questions about the electronics, the batteries, the potting, how to manipulate the console? Not reinventing the wheel here. It's all stuff that you guys are really used to for the most part, with just a little bit more detail.
With 30 seconds on movement, 20 seconds.
It's supposed to be 30 seconds, but I'll tell you, it definitely does not feel like 30 seconds. And Even on the old SCBA, 30 seconds by goes by like that. So, any other questions on the electronics? Alrighty. So, one last thing I want to point out about the electronics. A lot of you guys had problems with, and not just your department, every department that runs AP75s that had the electronics connection up here on the back frame that would always break or snap off or get caught on something. It's now up under this plastic shielding and runs up the hose, and you never see that connection. So this pack, the X3 since 2013, I think I've changed, this is just my personal experience, I think I've changed 5 of those for warranty repairs. It had nothing to do with it getting caught on something, it just had faulty wiring, a solder connection broke on the inside that wasn't soldered well. But I've done 5 in the roughly 5 years I've been in FireTech. So, and they were all on one department. So, that should be a non-factor. Moving forward, you shouldn't lose those HUD lights due to that problem. The next big thing to talk about is the pathway of air. So, if you thought that this was born before, it's only going to get worse. I'm going to try to make this as simple as possible. I'm not going to try to get into a ton of detail because this is where, again, going to the tech course, you've got 8 to 10 guys who are going to get a much more thorough version of this. You guys used to be tech level 2s, which made you guys an independent repair center. You guys are not retaining the independent repair center level, but you are going to still have tech level 1s who will be able to disassemble the inside of the regulator, clean it out, make sure that you put that back together. All right. So, pathway of air. You've got your standard CGA connection hose here on the bottom. Going into your reducer. Your reducer used to be up on the shoulder, but now because they want to make it ergonomic, contrary to popular belief, guys, the strongest part of your bodies aren't your upper bodies, it's your lower bodies. So putting all that weight on that properly fastened waistband, like we talked about earlier, it's going to reduce all that fatigue. From there, your air goes into your reducer, and the first place it goes is your RIC UAC. This is your high pressure air connection for your RIC bags. When you connect a RIC bag there, you guys know that that high pressure is going to equalize cylinders, right? So when you connect, that connection equalizes cylinders. Not to be confused with the buddy breather that we'll get into here in a little bit. The second place it goes is directly behind it. It's extremely difficult to see. It is a red anodized high pressure relief valve. Now these are calibrated to just over 4.5, just over 5.5, or just over 22.16, depending on the pressure of the SCBA. It is designed to relieve anything over the recommended or the production pressure of the SCBA.
So we can't put 6,000 to the, we couldn't put a 6,000 connection to that, we blow that.
Technically, you can put a 6,000 PSI connection to it, but you're going to blow off 1,500 PSI right out of that port. So that's why it's there, and that's a perfect representation. If there's a department around here running 5.5, which I don't think there is realistically, I think that there's more departments in this area that may be running 22.16. So if you hit them with a 4.5 RIP bag, their SCBA is going to function as long as it's a Scott with a high pressure relief valve, which has been around since 2007 edition newer. It's going to blow off the remaining PSI above that. What it is a calibrated spring that can't be adjusted by us. It comes as a unit from a manufacturer. It's called a couple valve. We didn't name it. It comes from some company that names it that way. But it is a calibrated spring and pressure plate. And when pressure builds up behind the plate, it releases, vents that air off, and collapses shut again. But it does that extremely fast. It sounds like a machine gun going off at your head. It will make you pucker the first time it happens. That does not mean it's out of service. That is a multi-use high-pressure relief valve. So it's designed to relieve that pressure. Now it's different if it's slowly, if you ever hear a low hiss of air coming from an SCBA, that indicates a leak. That high-pressure pop and then it goes away is not a leak, it's that high-pressure valve doing what it is. Now if you put a 4.5 cylinder inside of your SCBA and you hear that go off, Never in the history of fire service has anybody hot filled a cylinder to over the pressure because it cools down to the appropriate pressure. That's never happened before. If for some ungodly reason a 4 or 5 cylinder had more air than it's supposed to, gets connected to this SCBA, that's why you could potentially hear that Kunkel valve fire off and relieve that extra pressure. So that way the end user only ever gets the appropriate pressure through this SCBA tube. Any questions about those high pressure relief valve and how that SCBA gets connected to the rig bag? From there are 2 cutouts on the front. These are the next 2 places that your air goes to. You have your primary piston and your secondary piston. Other manufacturers of SCBA will tell you that they have 2 pistons and they're not wrong, but they're in line. It's the same pathway of air. Scott, it's 2 completely independent pathways of air that work independently of each other. Per NFPA, if a piston fails, it has to fail in the open position, so that way you are always getting air as long as you have air in your system. But by wearing a Scott, it's like wearing 2 SCBA on your back, because you've got 1 piston that works for the first 2/3 of an SCBA, and then due to the 2013 NFPA change, you now have a 1/3 transfer, so that other piston works for the last 1/3 of your cylinder. Without getting into pressures and everything like that, the question was asked the other day, at what pressure does your vibe alert fire off at? And that's at 135 PSI. Is what functions and drives your vibe alert. So you guys know that at 135 PSI, once you dip below that, there's not enough air to actuate that vibe alert. And all the vibe alert is a pneumatic hammer and a piece of metal. And it's just the striker that comes out and hits that piece of metal, causing that vibration, that tactile and audible sound in your face piece. So once you dip below that, as it was pointed out yesterday, a lot of guys were still getting a significant amount of managed breaths under that 135 PSI threshold. Okay? The thought process used to be quarter in, quarter fight, quarter out. You never hear the vibe alert, but we know that nobody ever really followed that. It was quarter in, half fight. You heard the vibe alert and tried to get the hell out after pushing it a little bit farther, right? It's the way it's always been in every department. They're now saying 3rd in, 3rd fight. When you hear that vibe alert, you have a 3rd out. You should be managing your air per department policies. Okay? As I read off in the beginning, department policies supersede how you're going to operate that SCBA. Okay? From there, your air goes into what we call the low end side of the block. And now, I absolutely hate calling, as you can see, there's dual redundancy on everything between the lights, the sound emitters, the 2 independent pathways of air. There's dual redundancy everywhere. And even in your high pressure relief. It is called the low pressure relief valve. It's located here at the top in the low pressure side of the block. And it looks like a little brass screw. It does not relieve low pressure. It would make no sense, right? It's a high pressure relief valve on the low pressure side of the block. So rather than venting off anything over 4,500 PSI, it's venting off anything over 225 PSI. So after your pistons reduce down that air coming out of your cylinder, anything over 225 PSI, which they deem harmful to the end user, gets vented off here through the side. And then after going through a series of check valves, it comes over this hose, up the hose, and into your regulator. So just like bringing your car into the shop, if you bring your car into the shop and say, hey, it's making weird noises from the front end, they look at the front end of the car, right? If you bring it into the shop and say, yeah, I don't know what's wrong, they're going to look at the whole car. You guys should have been doing this prior to using a outside repair center here at FireTech and Safety. This is a regulator. It regulates how much air goes to your face. This down here is your reducer. If you bring the SCBA to me and you say, hey, the 2nd stage reducer, which a lot of departments call this a 2nd stage reducer, even though it does nothing to reduce air, the guys are going to have no idea where to look. If you say, hey, it's leaking from the regulator, my guys are going to go straight to the regulator, check for a leak here first, and then test your whole pack. Right? Just being able to properly tag where there's an issue and just using the right terms, regulator, reducer, Those are really the only two things you have to remember. I don't need to remember relief valves, high pressure hoses, and just regulator or reducer. All right? So, this is probably one of the most misunderstood things when it comes to how a Scott air pack works. I'm going to get into this when we talk about the face piece here in a minute. I just want to cover your universal buddy breather system before we get there. So it used to just be called the buddy breather. It's now got the U in front of it. It's the universal fitting, and that's what pushed the 2018 standard into 2019. Scott always used a silver fitting called Hansen. They now use a black fitting called Rectus. So Hansen's been used since the mid 80s for Scott. Yes, Draeger and MSA were using the Rectus fitting prior to. With that being said, Scott obviously fought that in the 2018 standard as a universal fitting. Draeger has more packs per capita worldwide, so they went with total quantity of packs out there that had the fitting versus what's more popular in the U.S., right? So that's why we're using the Rectus fitting. It's now a universal fitting per NFPA, so you can now connect to MSA, Draeger, any other manufacturer with the 2018 compliant SCBA with that fitting. Also, for the 2018 NFPA compliancy, the pouch has to be deployable with one hand. What that means is it deploys extremely easily, so please, if it gets snagged on something, you're going to end up with about 36 inches of hose and an aluminum block dragging on the ground or getting slammed in a door. Just be aware of where this is. The pouch does deploy easily. It's designed to deploy that easily per NFPA compliancy. Again, it has to be deployable with one hand.
Yeah, it's just more comfortable than you, right? I don't get tangled up.
Exactly. Male and female rectus, you can connect either way to another SCBA. All these EBSS pouches are mounted on the right-hand side of the SCBA, which means you have 36 inches to your buddy, but your buddy does not have 36 inches to you. You guys had these in the past, if I remember correctly. You guys are well acquainted with the fact that this does not equalize air. You are breathing the lowest cylinder down first. So you can disconnect and reconnect this under pressure. I like to say that once you connect this, you really can't disconnect because you're leaving the guy with less air than he got to. But it was brought to my attention yesterday that, yes, you can still disconnect. I say you can't, but it's not, you physically can't. Just from an air management point, if you have to extricate yourself or if you have to get on a rip bag or something along those lines, you can always disconnect this. All right? Little rubber boot goes in the pouch here on your side. Any questions about the EBSS? Like I said, for 2018 NFPA compliancy, if you have a buddy breather system, it has to have the Rectus fitting on it. You can also connect that to a rip bag as well on the low pressure side. So if there's no questions about the EBSS, we're going to go to the regulator. And the regulator and the mask conversation go hand in hand. So, do you all know how you breathe on a Scott pack? It's in and out through the big hole, right? Exactly. Your nose cone. So, when you get fit tested, like I fit tested this gentleman here in the beginning, we fit test the fit to the outer seal of your face and to the nose cone. Air comes through what we call the spray bar. It's a series of 10 holes across the top of your regulator here. When connected to the SCBA, or when connected to the face piece, those 10 holes spray up and across the inside of your face piece, naturally defogging and cooling that face piece, giving it its high temperature rating. You guys may be using AB3000s now. This is the AB3000 HT. As you you guys can guess, HT just stands for the high temp. From there, once your air passes into this pressurized zone that is positively pressurized to just above atmospheric pressure, because positive pressure, if you have an ambient atmospheric pressure outside, rather than when you breathe in, or rather than being a negative pressure system, it's not going to suck in carcinogens or hazardous environment. If this moves on your face, if you have a cut, if something happens, it's going to push air out rather than suck it in. When you breathe in, due to the pathway of least resistance, there are just these little rubber red nose cones. What happens is those will just fold in due to the natural pressure of your diaphragm inhaling air into your lungs and suck air in from your face piece. You are not technically breathing from the SCBA. You're breathing from the pressurized air inside your face piece. All your SCBA is doing is sensing that dip in pressure in the face piece and refilling the mask, kind of like a balloon. Then when you breathe out, because you're putting pressure on the backside of those red nose cups, they stay locked shut, and you breathe out through the exhalation port. There are no inhalation or exhalation valves on a Scott. It's ports, because you're breathing in through those inhalation ports on the nose and out through the exhalation port in the front. Valves dictate how much air and regulate how much air. The only thing that regulates how much air you can breathe, or how fast you can breathe it on a Scott SCBA, is how fast your diaphragm and how much air your diaphragm can take in and take out, right? The only valve on the regulator here is your purge valve up here at the top. And as you guys know, all that does is it's going to bypass into your face piece, so that way it bypasses your diaphragm and it's going to blow that air into your face. There's a tall lug. Tall lug up is completely off. Tall lug down is completely on. It is a ball valve of sorts, so as you rotate that, you're going to get a varying degree of nothing to all of it, right? Now, in 2007, one of our competitor SCBAs put out a slam campaign that said, breathe the last guy's last breath. Well, if you're breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth, how does that work? Well, they say that bacteria gets caught in here, and when you breathe in again, you're breathing air and that bacteria back out of your regulator. But when you exhale, there are three main pieces on the inside of this regulator. And the easiest way to describe it is there's a balloon that we call the diaphragm with a hole in the bottom, and then a spring-loaded plunger. So when you're inhaling air, that balloon is collapsed due to the spring. As you exhale, you inflate that balloon, compress that spring, and that plunger opens up that hole at the bottom. Air escapes, and then the second you stop exhaling, you stop providing that pressure on the backside of that balloon, and it collapses a balloon. Now, this typically gets a chuckle out of people when I ask this question. Can anybody here suck air out of a collapsed balloon? There's nothing in a collapsed balloon. Unless you're really good at sucking, you ain't getting nothing out of it. But due to the pathway of least resistance, it's a golf ball in the garden, those guys. So that diaphragm, when collapsed, due to the pathway of least resistance, before you can provide enough suction to be able to actually fold that balloon in and suck bacteria out of the regulator, you're breathing air in through your nose cone. So pneumatically speaking, you have just as much of a chance of getting sick off the Scott SCBA as any other manufacturer on the market. Can you get sick off somebody else's face piece? Yes, this is gross. We'll talk about how gross this is in just a second. Can you get sick off somebody else's SCBA? Per Scott, I can't say no, but you have an infinitesimally small chance of getting sick and bacteria back out of this regulator, to the point that other competitors that say you have virtually zero chance, we match their virtually zero chance. Now, Now that we know how you guys breathe in and out of this face piece, what's the fog on the inside of the lens? 100% from concentrated sweat. It's not breath, because your breath is completely isolated from where that fresh air is coming in. So it is literally the sweat from your eyes and your forehead. These things are filthy. Think about how much fog is on the inside of these when you're working really, really hard. That's where the bypass, you guys are hitting it with the bypass a little bit. There are ways to prevent moisture from building up. None of them are Scott approved. You'll hear some guys, especially at some of the Metro Boston departments, have told me that they take a single drop of Simple Dawn, which is like the tiniest drop, and they rub it across the entire lens with their finger and let it dry. I've never tried it. I don't know if it works. So there are ways to potentially mitigate any small amount of moisture buildup. Realistically, on the AV3000 HTs and your X3 Pro, the way that the air flows across the inside really does help mitigate that moisture buildup. Into the AV3000 HT, you got your dual floating seal. It is a single piece that folds back on itself. It allows this face piece to kind of float on your face, which means you don't really have to wrench this thing to the moon to really get this thing to create a good seal. Mediums fit about 90% of the individuals, especially when you guys were getting your fit tests. Unless you got a bison skull like me, you guys probably have a medium. The next up is larges. About 8% of the individuals are in larges, and then in the rare case, there's about 2% of the population that wear smalls. So, from there, your nose cone, you'll notice this gray nose cone is sitting on top of the black gasket around it. If for some reason during cleaning, this gets pulled up on top, you will not get a good seal. That gray nose cone has to be on top of that black seal to get a proper seal from what we do the fit test with. Okay? Also, it's no longer a single lens due to the high temperature ratings that came out in 2013. This is a dual polycarbonate lens. Now, when this heats up, unlike the old masks that used to heat up and used to get like this alien versus predator bubbling effect on the inside of the face piece that kind of push out due to the positive pressure, this does not happen anymore. The two lenses are too stiff that when they get heated up, they don't bend like that. But that was typically a good indication of when you done got too hot, right? Now, in between those two lenses, a silver-colored epoxy, that when it gets too hot, it almost looks like mercury running through the inside of the face piece. You get these like silver waves in between the two lenses. So that's a visual indicator that your mask has been compromised. Okay? So, AV3000 HT face piece, X3 Pro. Both of these were tested on a 30-minute cylinder at 500 degrees. Then the mask is taken off, put under a 1500-degree blowtorch from about 3 inches away for 3 seconds to simulate a flashover, and then it's tested again at 500 degrees. So that question came up yesterday as to what the heat ratings are. I would have to get you actual Scott spec on exactly what the heat ratings are, but to pass that FPA compliance, it has to be in a breathed down a 30-minute cylinder, 500-degree environment, and then a flashover test on the face piece. Any questions about the SCBA or the face piece, pathway of air, electronics, anything that we've talked to up until this point? Alrighty. So the last thing that we're going to talk about today, as I wind this up and tuck this back into the pouch, is the RIT bag. So currently, you guys are probably going to be putting your SCBA into service very quickly. The RIT bags will probably follow shortly there afterwards. So, So you've got your strap that comes with your rip bag. You'll notice a series of rings all the way around. They're equally spaced all the way around this SCBA. That way you can hook all sorts of ropes, tools, flashlights, straps, and different configurations around the SCBA. You then come with a rip regulator. This does not have any electronics in it, so there is no HUD visor. And then you have your console. This console now has 2 AA batteries in it, but it is not constantly on like the SCBA is. There's no NFPA compliancy that governs rip bags. This rip bag is not turned on all the time. These AA batteries are running 3 LEDs, a red, an amber, and a green. Just like a HUD visor, you're going to get the same colors that you're going to get on this rip bag from those LEDs. So that way it's a visual cue without actually having to check the gauge exactly what pressure you're at. This will give you an idea. 2 AA's are located here under the silver screws on the side. Again, Energizer Industrials is what I recommend. And as you can see, it's been Scott shipped with as well. Now, there is a high pressure and low pressure side of this bag. It was brought up in yesterday's class that currently you guys can, with your eyes closed in a blackout environment, manipulate your rip bags and know exactly what the high pressure and low pressure sides are, right? Your chief did. So,
Which way out?
So, this RIP 3 has a hard sled that it's marketed as being able to lay somebody on and use as an actual rescue sled to drag out of an environment, stuff like that. The joke was made yesterday that unless it's Lieutenant Amato, that it's not. You're not gonna fit. You're not gonna fit on the back.
No.
So.
I know.
So, there is extremely tactile poles on either side. There's a sphere and a toggle. I've heard every joke under the sun, but whatever euphemism works for you guys as to being able to remember that the low pressure is the sphere and the high pressure is the cylindrical toggle. So,
I see you all in the shaft.
I didn't make them up, I've just heard them.
Yeah, okay.
So, high pressure side, you're going to pull the toggle. There is not enough space to pack a face piece or anything into this bag on the high pressure side, so there's nothing to manipulate over here except A, connecting your 1-hour cylinder via your CGA, and then your high pressure trans-filling line for your rip bag. This will function on any SCBA 2018 all the way back to, I think it's 2002 or the 1997 edition, is where that RIP UAC came out. There is a long hose. It is woven up the side here in a plastic housing. And then obviously once it's connected, that's how you're going to turn your cylinder on to activate that cylinder and rip bag. Then, the sphere, the low pressure side, unless you legally change your name to RIT use only, please, please, please do not bring this to a fit testing session. I can neither confirm nor deny that I have had somebody or multiple people bring this to me and say, I wear it because it lets me see better. Don't wear this. Put this inside the RIP bag. Use this for RIP purposes only. That's what it says across the top. Don't cover it with a sticker that says your name instead, please. I don't want it to be more than once that I've seen that. You'll notice that the masks, all of them, come with an adhesive on the side. Some of them pull off really nicely. Other ones, let's hope it doesn't do it, leave a residue behind. If you do have a residue that's left behind as you're pulling off this paper that comes on all new production face pieces, just use a 70% isopropyl alcohol wipe and just wipe that away. Okay? Inside that low pressure side, there is also a RIP block in here. From the factory, because you've purchased new SCBA with rectus fittings, you have rectus fittings on your SCBA, or on your SCBA and your RIP bag. You'll notice there are an additional 2 plugs. These additional 2 plugs, what they're going to do is be able to attach the old Hansen fittings to the side. So when you guys upgrade your RIP bags to these, as you see, there are 5 here. You guys are going to be putting them into service after, from what I understand, the SCBA. We're going to take the fittings off of your old SCBA or your old RIP bag and use the adapters to adapt into these plugs. So that way, you are backwards compatible for your RIP bag. So anybody mutual aid that has a Hansen fitting or any pack older than a 2018 Scott will connect in the side. And if it doesn't connect in the side, it's going to connect to the universal rectus fitting at the front. This rectus fitting can be connected directly to your ESS. It will still breathe the lowest cylinder down first. So what does that mean? It's going to breathe down the one on your back, not the 60-minute cylinder that's in here. Realistically, if you need air and you're able to function under your own power, guess who's carrying out the RIP bag? So this does connect. This, again, has a long hose on it. It is woven up the side. I'm not going to unweave it because it's kind of a pain to put back in. Easier than the old RIP 2s where you kind of have to slide them into the pockets like you guys are used to, but still slightly more difficult than being the easiest thing on the planet. So with these 2 toggles open, there is a Velcro on the side going the full length, which allows you to access the whole bag. Realistically, your hour cylinder is designed to fit perfectly in there. There's really not a lot of other space in there. And you'll see that there is a pocket designed for that face piece with the regulator tucked on the inside of the face piece in here. That regulator is also designed to connect to your low pressure fitting, which when I tuck that mask in, it's down there. Once your cylinder's in place, Velcro goes back across. You got your high pressure side and your low pressure side. There are 2 pouches. One is full length. One has space for the console. What you guys put in your RIP bags, what you guys put in your RIP bags. But they do make it easier to put stuff in. So that fully encompasses everything that I had to talk to you about today, except for cleaning and sanitizing. I have already spoken to Lieutenant Amato and some of the other individuals here at the department. There is a thermo-molded section on your mask bezel to put a sticker with a name on it. If you end up getting a new mask, which you guys are all getting new masks, but if you get issued a new mask, something happens to your old mask, something happens to that tack, you get your mask in a bag like so. And you have a manual on the inside. Inside the manual is 2 pieces of paper. Your white reflective name tag sticker is located on the piece of yellow and white paper that are together. It is extremely difficult to see unless you know what you're looking for. Most people see, especially since this is tucked on the inside, a user manual, and like every normal person takes it and throws it in the garbage. And then they ask me later on, do we sell name tags? It provides you with one. Sharpies hate drying on this material. It sounds like when you guys are issued masks, there are going to be pre-installed and pre-written on. That being said, if you ever have to replace that sticker, I highly recommend allowing it to dry for as long as possible, because even after letting it dry for 2-3 minutes and then sticking it on, I've seen so many people smudge them and then have to rip them off, and then they end up just taking a silver Sharpie and writing it in there. So just be cognizant of that moving forward. Which brings me to cleaning and sanitizing. You guys all understand that cleaning and sanitizing are 2 separate steps. Cleaning is the removal of heavy particulate, dust, debris, soot, anything, right? And simple green is no longer an approved substance to be used on the SCBA. Came out a couple of months ago. I haven't done a lot of research as to why simple green is no longer an approved cleaning solution. Just don't use it. We at FireTech and Safety, and Scott recommends Simple Dawn. It's that easy. It's a little Dawn bottle with the rubber ducky on the side, a little duck on the side. If you see Ultra Dawn or Super or from Concentrate or from all this other stuff on these soaps, on this dish soap, all it means is that there's ammonia in the product, and ammonia eats thermoplastics. Now, you're not going to squirt the soap on that's got ammonia on it, watch it bubble up and crack and dissolve. But over time, it's going to chew away at those plastics, can become brittle, and then you're going to go to hit that cylinder retention strap one day, and the handle's just going to break. And you're going to be like, what the hell just happened? What happened is ammonia chewed it away over time. Simple Dawn is a non-ammonia product. I get nothing from Energizer, I get nothing from Simple Dawn, or I get nothing. This is just products that we use. When you guys clean an SCBA, assuming that you take off the soft goods, even if you don't, soapy water and a bristle brush, and then nothing more than 90 psi worth of air or water. Now, if 90 psi is here to here, is 90 psi still from here to the pack? No. Most shop air is about 120 psi to drive shop tools, right? So if you're drying something off from back here, is that 120 psi at the pack? No. All they're saying is, don't be knuckleheads, don't put 90 psi or more to the SCBA because this is thin material. 90 psi from an inch away or from direct contact is a lot of pressure. So make sure that you guys are using something that's under 90 psi to either wash or dry. Soapy water in a bristle brush. What do we mean by soapy water in a 5-gallon bucket? You know, an ounce. We're not talking half a bottle of detergent. I've gone to some places and seen more detergent than water inside the 5-gallon bucket. It's unnecessary. Because you're not sanitizing, you're just cleaning heavy debris. And the Simple Dawn helps break down oils and stuff like that. This pack is clean. You guys get cleaning. Is this pack sanitized? No. I've touched it, people have touched it, played around with it. Not sanitized. Sanitizing is a different step. Sanitizing is killing bacteria and viruses on a microscopic level. So, when sanitizing, a lot of people do a Dunkin' slosh method to clean their equipment. It's great for the first guy, not so much for the last guy. Your dunk turns into their slosh. So, the recommended methods is to lightly mist. And when I say lightly mist, that doesn't mean squirting it with a squirt bottle until it's dripping wet. But thoroughly but lightly mist the entire SCBA, the face piece, inside the regulator here, squirt it right in. And there are 3 different approved sanitizing methods put out March 13th or 18th, 2020, in the middle of the pandemic to satiate people's desires for trying to sanitize properly their equipment. If anything out of COVID-19, this is probably the best thing that's ever happened because now people are conscious about sanitizing their equipment. There are 3 approved methods. I'll send you guys the documentation on it. One is a product called Fresh Gear. Fresh Gear is approved to be used with your turnout gear. It's probably what you're using as a disinfectant in your gear extractors already. It's approved for use on this. They sell them in gallons or 4-gallon bundles or a variety of different configurations, but it's expensive. And in the middle of the pandemic, couldn't find it. There's 2 other options. There's an aqueous solution. Don't ask me to spell aqueous. I will not pass the 3rd grade. It is an iodine, rubbing alcohol, or denatured alcohol, and water mixture. It tells you exactly how to mix it. You feel like Walter White when you're done, but it's an iodine-based substance, so it does stain.
Yeah, I thought that was just
Aqueous solution. What you guys are thinking of is Wescadine.
Oh.
Wescadine was a pre-manufactured product that had an iodine solution at the bottom, and it was much nastier than the aqueous solution because everybody used to just pour more because more is better, right? So rather than what nobody understood about those little bottles of Wescadine used to come in, but the concentrate only had about an inch of it at the bottom. You're supposed to fill it with hot water, shake it up, dilute it. Everybody started pouring stuff together. It stains. It's dangerous. Wescadine has been discontinued for about 2.5 years now, I think. It's been a while. I don't recommend the iodine solutions. They do work well, but they do stain, especially when you have to mix your own iodine mixture. A little complicated. At FireTech and Safety, we use a hypochlorite solution, which is the 3rd solution on the list. A hypochlorite solution is just a fancy way of saying 1 to 100 chlorine bleach in water. That's less potent than a public swimming pool. It's about the same potency as a chlorine tablet to purify drinking water if you're a hiker or if you're a camper or something like that. 1 to 100 chlorine bleach in water is a hypochlorite solution. They say it sanitizes at 110 degrees, which is what they still deem safe to the human body. And as I was instructed, as I was told yesterday, your taps are probably pumping out at about 180 here. So, hot water, hypochlorite solution, sanitizes in 2 minutes. A hypochlorite solution at room temperature, 72 degrees, sanitizes in 10 minutes. So you do not need to heat that solution up, but as it was said yesterday, hot water from the tap should be hot, thoroughly mist these, not sopping wet. Like I said, the hypochlorite solution is less potent than a swimming pool. So are you going to stain or bleach things by spraying this on fabrics? No. If you jumped into a swimming pool with a shirt on or with a, hopefully the swim trunks on, that didn't bleach. You're not going to bleach the SCBA, and it's not going to be harmful to the end user if you spray it down and actually have to put it right back on before it's dried. Now, how do you dry it? Well, you can let it air dry.
Doesn't leave a residue.
Nope. Not, and again, even if it does get the moisture built up and it reactivates, which it doesn't, it's not at a harmful level to the end user. That chlorine bleach and water, though, that 1 to 100 mixture is only good for 24 hours. That's why the residue isn't a factor. That 1 to 100 bleach and water, they say after 24 hours after initial mix, it is no longer going to be potent enough to sanitize. So this doesn't mean you can pre-mix chlorine bleach and water, put it in the cabinet, take it out and spray it down. That means when you go to sanitize, my guys at the shop, we bought the spray bottles that have the measurements. We have bought 1 liter spray bottles from Amazon. They fill it up to the 100 milliliter mark and then fill the rest up with water, shake it up, and then they take the top off and put it in the microwave to heat the water up. Because unlike you guys, we don't have the luxury of 180 degree water. So they heat it up because that way it sanitizes faster for them. Do not, please, please, please do not put the sprayer to a squirt bottle in the microwave to heat it up. A, you're going to build up pressure underneath that sprayer, and B, there's a little metal spring inside the sprayer. It'd be kind of entertaining if you guys lit your own microwave on fire trying to sanitize your firefighting equipment.
About time we get a fire in this city.
We do that.
So that's how we recommend sanitizing. It's how we sanitize all our equipment. It's the way we've been sanitizing since even prior to COVID. We have a whole sanitizing booth at FireTech and Safety that if you send us your equipment, my guys don't even begin to work on it until after they've sanitized it. So, any questions about cleaning and sanitizing? So the documentation, there's recommended methods from Scott on how to clean regulators and SCBA. Again, it's dry documentation, it's technical documentation. It's not specifically for techs, it's for anybody who may clean an SCBA. There's also the recommended solutions page that I'll send you guys as well. I think I may have already sent it over, I'm not quite sure. I'll make sure that, guys, it gets to you. So, any questions on anything that we've covered in the past couple hours? I completely lost track of time.
How about voice amps?
You guys do have voice amps. They're going to be issued to you, I think.
Yeah, it's optional. There's going to be no voice amps on the apparatus. So this is for your mask.
On our own personal
Your personal mask, if you wish to have one, it'll be issued. There's 60 of them.
So that brings up a good point about Scott. Scott is the only manufacturer currently of SCBA that their face pieces meet and exceed the speech transmission index for the NFPA compliancy test with a non-electronically amplified voice. So what that means is we are the only manufacturer of SCBA that you don't have to have an electronic voice amp. Every other manufacturer, especially when you look at other manufacturers, you'll notice that it's manufactured onto the SCBA because they don't pass the test. We do offer a voice amp, and as you were just told, that it's going to be personal option as to whether or not you want to get issued one. It is 3 AAA batteries that power it. It's an on-off button to turn it on and off. It is not required. You will notice that there is a voice amp bracket on the side of this face piece. This does not have any holes that anything can get through. It's not like if you don't have a voice amp that you have an open void. So with or without that voice amp, this mask is completely NFPA compliant. And CPR and breathing.
That's why the vote was so close when we did ours.
Yeah.
That we figured if somebody wants to use their own mask with the voice amp, have at it.
I like the old hockey puck style voice amps, the big round ones that stand on the side on the AV3000s and 2000s. Those things used to be like megaphones, but the problem was you couldn't speak into a microphone with them for your radio. Now the new ones, they've brought down that decibel level so that way it doesn't interfere with the microphone and get that squelch or that transmission to the actual.
So they did upgrade them a little bit.
They're upgraded, but they're toned down so that way they don't interfere with it. And with that toning down at the decibel level, in my personal opinion, there's not a huge difference between the voice amp and not having a voice amp. That's how good the new masks are with speech transmission. And I think you guys kind of found that out when you were doing the evaluations, that you didn't find a big difference between the two.
What we did. Right, right, but they have the option to have another voice amp.
So we have 60 of them, even if we're so close.
Yes.
Good to know.
So, any other questions?
I have one after this, just, I wanna make sure we get everything we need, if, sure, it's kind of a half-assed question now, if these go on service Friday, I don't wanna have them in service until we can marry up to our grid pack.
You can through the high pressure side. You'll always be able to through the high pressure side. You just won't be able to connect into the EBSS from the low pressure side of that rig.
Kind of like putting the tower.
Right, no, I know, but that's what he said he wants that.
Right, so the only downside is if it's a pin or something you don't have access to the EBSS, you have to do a mass transfer.
Correct. Because you'll still have your masks over there. That won't have a rectus fitting to connect into that EBSS package.
Since we did get a new tower, I don't think many of us have been really told or assuming, we use the UEBSS to connect to our tower. Yeah. Correct, but is that what Scott, is that what they're doing, is plug in using your EBSS?
Scott's stance on the universal buddy breather system is it was not designed for supplied air vehicle use. It was designed for interpersonal operations. If I was to go like this and cover my 3M logo, yes, we typically find that fire departments are using the UEBSS to connect into their towers. But something to remember about connecting to your tower with that UEBSS is it's breathing the lowest cylinder down first. So if your cylinder is turned on and you connect in, exactly. So as long as you have regulated air coming out, now if you have 5.5 coming off your tower, and you hit 5.5 onto the side, you're going to blow 1,000 psi out through your thing. If it's regulated air on your tower, which it may be, then
Sounds like breathing air on a tower is useless.
Unless you just have the mask, whatever you talked about, like you said, we can't do that.
But you're not kind of.
Well, like,
But we can't use our pack.
what Jackson said this morning,
Right, you can't do that. Rosenbauer doesn't put it Scott specific, I'm not just saying.
But either that,
Right.
you're also at 6,000 PSI for breathing, right?
if that's what you have for K tanks on the side of your tower, then
Yeah.
then you have
So
6,000
you'll,
psi.
so you'll be blowing out the regulator, right?
You'll blow out the high pressure relief valve for 1,500 psi.
What's that?
You either fill it to 4,500 or you, because it's a non-NFPA compliant, well, it's not mandated by, controlled by NFPA compliances, you regulate the air coming out of the tanks on the tower with. We've seen customers use RIC bag because RIC bags aren't mandated by NFPA compliances. We've watched departments use the regulators, or the reducers, the reducer off the RIC pack in line with the tower, and it reduces the air down, and then when you connect to your EBSS pouch, you're already reduced air, so you're connecting. If you connect high pressure air to this side, you're bypassing the reducer, you're going to potentially damage the SCBA.
We can buy all the individual parts
I can sell you, or FireTech and Safety can sell you guys any Scott parts as a distributor that you guys may require for whatever your firefighting needs may be. Remember when I said that that first time that Kunkel valve, when it fires off, you're gonna pucker a little bit? You guys are sure starting to make me pucker a little bit. So I'm gonna use as much generic terms as possible. Realistically, the trucks, as far as I haven't looked deep into the trucks, but I know rip bags aren't mandated to be following kind of NFPA compliancy. So what you guys do as a solution, or what FireTech's compressors techs can help and assist to make sure that you have regulated air on your vehicles that best suits the department. That that's something that we have to see and assess and find out what your guys' needs are and what it may take or what it can't take to happen.
Well, I mean, if you're working in a bucket of smoke, and
No, that's what I'm saying, how often is that gonna happen?
right.
Grab
Well,
a few
no,
extra SCBA bottles and stick them in the tower with you.
yeah, so then you get 20 minutes of air before
Right.
the fire alert comes up. You know, basically the bottom line is we have an air tank on the side of the tower. We have airlines going up to it. We need to make it fucking work.
What I'm saying is, I would get it set up like that,
Oh.
whatever we have to do, because it's not gonna happen that often, when it does, we can just plug it away, and then we need to.
Any other questions? Alrighty, if that's it, then I'm gonna pass it back to whoever's in charge today and let you guys either go back to station 2 or.
Jackson, what do you think? Good, Jackson?
I think Jackson was in charge.
Yep.
I'll
In charge now. Oh, that's right.
Just wanna hit
Yep.
that, hit that.